Today I'd like to do a follow-on comment to my EMP report. Had many comments, many emails. Some of you said, you know, you give us these dark messages and then you expect us to do something positive with them. Let me say this, and I said this about the neon vests, the yellow vests, the neon vests. When Gandhi was asked how it was that he thought a bunch of diapered Indians were going to defeat or remove the British Empire from India, what he said was, "It is not up to me to see what the results are. It is up to me," I'm paraphrasing of course, "it is up to me to see what I can do to change the world, and the results will take care of themselves. What I know is that if we do nothing, we know what the outcome is going to be." And so once again, I would admonish, request, engage, entreat you to do something, to step forward, because our submission, our placidness, our sheepliness will get us nowhere. We are not defeated. If you can hear my voice, we are not defeated. We must respond. And the whole cue clicking and Trump's going to win and we don't need to do anything else except eat popcorn and click our mice and maybe buy a t-shirt or put a sticker on the bumper of our car is not going to do it. By itself, it's not going to do it. And President Trump has said to us, "I can't do this alone. You must engage." And we look at the liberals, the so-called progressives, the Antifa folks and the rest of that, and they show up, and we don't. So, do you expect us to win if we do nothing while they show up? The answer is no. Until such time as our leaders are more afraid of us, more responsive to us, more engaged with us than they are with their masters and with the blackmail and the dark side and the money and the lobbyists and the following that they must give now, until they are more concerned about us than they are with them, we lose. That's just it. So let me give you some of the other stuff which I want you to pay attention to. Some of you said, well, the Deagle report, if you paid attention to the Deagle report, you wouldn't have used it. Well, I used it as an example, not as a result, not as an outcome. I'm not saying the outcome will turn out exactly the way Deagle planned it, but what it did do is it gave us a working statistical scenario by which we could be taken down, and it is a very real one. So, and there are people, some of you who said, well, the EMP thing's not going to happen. Obviously, the EMP thing is a no big deal. Some of you said there are no EMPs because obviously we live in this crystal bubble and there is no atmosphere and there is no sun and blah, blah, blah. Well, there is no benefit unless we take these things as real. And let me give you something else, some other things which are real. And I would say to you as we go through this, it doesn't do us any good to take pills if we still show the disease. And the disease is we don't respond. We're not citizens. We're not active. We're not engaged. You can take all the pills you want, but if you sit sedentary in your lounger, you're just the same as you were when you were sick, right? So what we need to do now is to see history as it really may be in some major portion and look at what could happen to us if we do nothing and then decide that we must do something. And I engage any of you to say what. All right, so let's take a look at some of this other stuff. I had guys that said to me, well, this is just like Y2K. It's just fear porn. It's just a false flag, and people got all wound up about it. Well, no. Y2K was this idiot construct that was the computers aren't geared to go into the next century, and so things could crash and we could have a whole problem. It was happenstance. It was inadvertent. It was not anybody's intentional planning. And of course it didn't happen. But here with the EMPs, what I'm saying to you is, yes, we could have a solar flare. Then that solar flare could take down our transformers and could basically neutralize our electronics for months or years to come. But far more likely, if you followed my little dark trail, far more likely is that it is a planned event, and it's either terrorists who do it, which I don't believe, or terrorists who are set up, which is possible, or a false flag blamed on terrorists, which I consider to be the 90% option. We would, in that circumstance, end up with a large portion of the country blacked out or browned out, and drawing from and engaging the rest of our transmission services, our electronic supply, and could take down either a huge part of the country or the whole country at once. 3 or 4 or 5 properly placed nuclear devices set at altitude of, let's say, 25 miles could, in line of sight, take down huge parts of this country, the transformers, the microelectronics, and the rest of that, and we've gone through that. So there are others of you who said, well, now that we have Trump elected and we don't have Hillary, everything's fixed. Well, I will say to you that's not true for possibly 2 reasons. One is that Trump may not be his own person. He may not be a good guy, which I hope and still think he is. He may be a good guy constrained, a good guy compromised, a good guy blackmailed, or he may be simply ill-advised. But he may not get the job done. In any case, he may not get the job done without us there. And not only that, the dark forces that have operated, that would have happily operated with Hillary and that would have taken us down, yes, faster than it probably is happening now, have been here since at least H.W. Bush and maybe Woodrow Wilson, and possibly ever since Andrew Jackson, fully engaged in our government taking this out. It's Tweedledee, Tweedledum. Our 2 major parties are not doing us any good. And certainly the neocons that are tucked in around Trump are not helping him. If you look and you see Rudy Giuliani and John Bolton and now William Barr helping Donald Trump, I'm going to tell you, you have cause for concern. And in addition to the Venezuela activity, the move to Israel, bolstering that up, no removal from Syria, nothing out of Yemen, North Korea, maybe not benefited, maybe benefited. Afghanistan still in full swing, and Iraq with our troops firmly committed. Where have we seen changes? Everybody says, Obama said, and now Trump says, well, I'll get you out of the wars, and nothing changes. So eating popcorn and clicking the mouse is not going to fix this. Let's take a look at some of the other things that may or will end up taking us down, especially if we sit and do nothing. 5G. Many of you talked about 5G and complained about the 5G is the real problem. I'm going to suggest to you that something else will happen before 5G takes full effect, but it is certainly something to be concerned about. And the fact that President Trump has both been in favor of 5G, has fully activated 5G, has told us he fixed NAVDA and went with the U.S., MCA, North American, Canadian, Mexican agreement, and it is worse than NAFTA and includes UN stuff in it, is not beneficial. See the flag? The flag is there. So you've got GMOs and food poisoning. You've got the chemicals and chemtrails and Monsanto and animal diversity being reduced. And bees, in some areas, 90% of our bee production gone. That's fruits, that's vegetables, that's all kinds of food stuff for us. And the lack of bees and insects is disastrous. We've got the obesity problem and the water and food contamination problems. Those are huge things. And cumulatively, they could take us out. Some people have said, well, why would they be doing EMPs if they've got us with 5G? Why would they be doing 5G if they've got us with EMPs or chemtrails? What I'm going to say to you is they've been planning this for 200 years. And if you look back, you can see in the 1970s, most of this stuff was already in place. The satellites, the takedowns, the transmission lines, the EMPs, the nuclear accidents, the terrorists, the rest of this stuff was already in place. They don't have to say, well, I'm going to take A, B, or C. They can say, we're going to take 15, we can try 15 plans, and we'll just watch to see what takes it down and go and ride with it. And if it's one thing in one area and one thing in another area, we don't care. If we clean most of the people out with EMPs and we do neutron bombs to pick up the remainder, or we do directed energy weapons, or we have fires or mudslides or floods, we can do it however we want. And all of those things are in play. So we've got obesity and water contamination. We've got vaccines. We've got plagues, Ebola and Zika, and other man-made ones. We have smallpox and some of the others that have been contained but are held in abeyance. We have flu shots. We have pole shift. We have electromagnetic storms. The pole shift thing could be huge, and it is wobbling, and some say, even the Russians say, that it may have moved 30 degrees, and the pole, the North Pole, instead of being somewhere in northern Canada within the Arctic Circle, is actually shifted over to Siberia. And there are others that say that the geologists point us to the potential that if it tips another 10 degrees or so, it could flip. And when it flips, it could change a lot of things. It could cause a tsunami. It could cause freezing. It could change the whole tilt of the earth. So a lot of these things are possible. We have grid failure, which of course is a possible part of the EMPs, but it's also of solar flares. Do we know that these flares and the magnetic irregularities that have occurred over these last 2 months are not being harped on us? All of that's possible. We've got potential rapid flips of the poles, which some of the geologists say could happen in the matter of a short period of time, where it would flip one way and then flip back, and we would probably not have normalcy for maybe decades or more. We've got evidence in Antarctica that it may have been a totally different kind of climate, and that there may have been people frozen in a tsunami basically as the pole shifted, and that could have been 20, 30, 40,000 years ago. We have terrorist attacks, obviously, real manufactured false flags, hoaxes. All of those things are possible, and they fit into the whole realm of these things, from transportation to electronics to nuclear events to all dirty bombs, all kinds of things. There has been saber rattling about war. And that war we would be World War III or some expanded war. We obviously had rattling problems with Syria and Russia and the United States bucking up against each other. Israel invading Syria at times. False flags perhaps with chemical weapons being used in Syria, allegedly by the Assad government. We've had North Korea, China, we've goaded China, we've done active stuff in their territories. We've had the islands in the South China Sea that they've expanded. They have a very much expanded Navy, and it's growing bigger all the time. We've got stuff going on with North Korea. We have Iran, which guys like idiot brush-face Bolton would like to start a war with Iran for no apparent reason. We have stuff going on in Venezuela. And of course the CIA and perhaps our military are involved in Venezuela in lots of ways, and it may be that the Russians, the Chinese, or somebody else wants to step in and do something. It certainly is an unstable situation, and any of those could trigger a bigger sphere. And any of those could trigger, if it triggers a bigger sphere, not just a nuclear holocaust, but, an EMP would neutralize a country. And the only answer we would have for multiple EMPs taking us down would be to multiply EMP somebody else, assuming we had the capacity to do it. once we had already been taken down. It takes a matter of a few seconds to cause a decade or more of damage. We have the obvious example and potential of a bank crash, and we have moved up in our equity offsets, our stock market exchange, in the fluff and puff of the exchange markets with Wall Street and with banking. We are again looking at dangerous changes that are going on with the Federal Reserve, and of course the Federal Reserve has increased interest rates, 6 or 7 times now in the last year, claiming they're trying to keep inflation down, which of course may be the exact opposite of what it does. Powell and the Federal Reserve are there not to balance us, not to protect us, not to fix us. They are private bankers trying to make the most money they can, and they will do it by devious means, as they did in 1929, as they have done in promoting wars in World War I and World War II, as they have done in financing bad guys and governments and terrorists, as they have done in 2008 when they faked the huge recession that took 40% of the equity out of the middle class, and they out the front door gave $700 billion to the bankers because they were too big to fail, and out the back door the Federal Reserve gave $29 trillion to the banks to play with, including enough money to buy the Wall Street about 3 or 4 times. So when are they going to benefit us? Well, they have never done so, and they're not about to do so now. And if a recession will benefit them, will leverage them, people say to me, well, gee, if the bankers were there to make money, then the last thing that they would do is damage the economy, because then they don't make as much money. And that was the Larry Greenspan argument when he helped to deregulate the entire banking industry, 20 years ago. And when he came back after 2008, he said, oh golly, I thought they'd regulate themselves. I didn't ever believe that they would cause problems that would bring the banks down. Yeah, well, there's 2 problems with that. One is that the immediacy of the greed that came before 2008 made billionaires out of some of those traders, and that was a really fun little process. Now, the fact that 50 or 70 or 100 million of us were worse off, and were worse off for decades, and many of us have not recovered, is one thing. And the second thing that Greenspan did not say and would not say is that it has nothing to do with the bankers making more money on a short-term basis. It has to do with them leveraging more power, more ownership, proportionally to the rest of the people. If there's a pie and they only own 20% of the pie, but by shaking the whole thing up and destroying part of it, even if they make the pie smaller, they end up with 40 or 50% of the pie, they still have gained. And that's what we have to take account of, is not how many trillions of dollars that were lost in Wall Street. It is how much leverage the wealthy, the elite got, the bankers got, out of taking the rest of the world down and leveraging themselves up. And they do it every time. So we have that. We have a potential dollar collapse, and they've been talking about it for decades, but now that we have this digital currency thing in, they are playing with it. So in places like India, where they have taken the largest bank currency, paper, out of circulation, gave people a week to turn it in, charged them, taxed them hugely, disproportionately taxed and took away, and then only allowed people to give back a certain small percentage of the money that they had deposited over a period of time. So it was, in that sense, the worst of all possible worlds. They will do that with us. They have shifted to digital currency in a number of places. They're moving away from having paper currency. They are now using cards. Now in some countries now they're using chips. So you could basically have your bank account right here on your thumb or your finger. And that would be the only place it would be found. And that means that they can both monitor you and your money at the same time. So we could have a dollar collapse, and that dollar collapse could cause another recession, a depression, or a huge devaluation of our currency. It could limit us and constrain us in how much we could import from other countries. And that's not all. I mean, we have had some information to the extent that Trump has been, there have been at least a dozen, perhaps 14 or 16 attempts on his life. In that setting, you know, the normal circumstance, quote, normal circumstance in the event of assassination is that we have a lovely, sweet guy like Lyndon Johnson step in where JFK was killed, or we have George H.W. Bush ready to step in case Hinckley, the Bush buddy, the Bush family friend, the crazy kid of the Bush family friends, the Hinkleys, managed to finish the job on Ronald Reagan. So we could have Mike Pence. I don't like Mike Pence any better than the rest of them. We could have Mike Pence step in, or they could take them both out in some kind of a shared deal, some kind of a fake terrorist deal or a lone wolf. And then we'd have, guess who? Nancy Pelosi is third in line. So we could conceivably have a takeout that would take both of them and give us Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in the House. And now the neocons in the Senate would be ready to run rampant and be fake Republicans, what they call them, rhinos, Republican in name only, which about 80% of them are. And finally, we could have a migration overrun. We could have last month, I think it was in January, they announced the other day that there were at least 70,000 that were caught crossing, which is the largest number, or that were crossing, which is the largest number we've had in decades. So we could conceivably have a situation where 70 to 100,000 or 150,000 people are crossing, or 300,000 people are crossing on a monthly basis. And part of the saber rattling about putting a wall up and or carefully monitoring it is that people are going to try to get in before that happens. They're going to try to be included before that happens. We have things like Fukushima and Chernobyl and the possibility that we could have an earthquake, a tsunami, or an EMP strike and have these things burn out, fail, not be properly lubricated, and have multiples of these throughout the world that would fail and cause huge, huge environmental problems. We have fake natural disasters, and many of you already know about this. We have probably guided hurricanes, that is, hurricanes that either can be enhanced, manufactured outright, or simply channeled to go in certain ways. And there are people on YouTube, you can take a look, that have shown us that there are the most irregular patterns of some of the hurricanes over the last several years. We have pole shifts, which again could cause natural disasters. We have earthquakes, and of course some of those are now being caused by fracking and others. We have fires, and I swear to you that prairie fire, that so-called prairie campfire, was a directed energy weapon. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind. We have floods and mudslides that are coming in. We have snow and cold and perhaps a mini ice age. There is the comment that we had 20 years ago that Al Gore helped popularize of global warming. Well, when that didn't look like it was necessarily happening, we had climate change. And climate change is all-encompassing. So it could be warmer or colder or bigger shifts or greater changes. And now we have the new word, and I got it while I was in San Diego. The new word is biodiversity. And so in order to maintain biodiversity, we can tell you to do whatever it is we want you to do because we call it biodiversity. It's an all-encompassing term. It allows for the stakeholders, which I consider to be a fake term. Anyone who calls himself a stakeholder says, well, I don't really have anything in this game. I don't have any skin in this game, but I claim it because I'm interested in the outcome. Therefore, I'm a stakeholder, which is, of course, a whole crazy idea. And, of course, we were going to see all of this global warming, and the trends were all up. What they didn't point out was they didn't look before 1960 because that wasn't the trend in a longer trend. And there is evidence that they took many, many, many of these weather reporting sites and moved them within the geographical area, within the local area, to the hottest spot they could find, thereby changing the temperature a couple degrees and making it look like everything was getting warmer when it really wasn't. And so all of those things could be going on, and we may not be having what is called global warming. So now we also have problems like water contamination and fracking. We have water ownership and aquifers, and there are some comments that the Bushes, for instance, have bought up a lot of Latin America aquifers, and they're going to privatize it. We have the destruction of the water distribution system and perhaps a preparation system in Libya, and getting rid of Gaddafi. It was the largest distribution water system in the world, I think, at the time, or at least that's what has been said. And of course we had to destroy that and get rid of Gaddafi because he had both financial independence and he also was attempting to help his people. He had to be a tyrant. He was not like Hillary, so she had to help get rid of him. We have the Noahide laws, and people brought these out. Numbers of people brought them out. The 7 sins: idolatry, murder, theft, sexual promiscuity, blasphemy, cruelty to animals, and just laws. And of course, all of these are being violated now, so it is going to bring in some kind of new change. I would say about the just laws, they need to be obeyed and universally applied. And the common concept that I was trained with, which is no man, no person is above the law. We have the rapture, which is a relatively new concept. It was not part of the Catholic Church. It was not part of the first 300 years after the death of Christ. It was not even until the late 1800s that it came up as a concept. I caution those of you who believe that the rapture is here and who feel validated in not doing anything because that means the rapture will come, is to take a look farther back in your history. I'm not telling you it's not true. I'm not telling you you have misunderstandings or your religion or whatever is wrong. I'm just telling you that historically it is a new concept. I believe that humans have free will. I believe that our Maker, the supreme being of us, gives us free will, and that supreme Maker gave us the free will to do good or to do evil, to do bad, and to have the choice between them and to make the right choice. And what I have tried to say here as part of my channel is, please folks, let's make the right choices. Let's make the choices for good. Let's be a positive force on this planet. Let's call the divine energy of our Maker in to help us. But let's show that divine entity that we deserve it, that we are here to bring change and for the betterment of mankind. Many of you have said, you've turned dark, you've turned negative, you're bringing all these bad stories to us, and what I have to tell you is that if you don't know the truth, you can't act on it. We must know the truth. We must encompass the negativity to face it square on. I think it was Franklin that said, a problem understood is a problem half solved. We need to know what the problem is, and I have tried to share at least my part of what I understand about it to make it better understood, to make it more encompassable by us. And that's the first part of it. The second part of it is not for us to say, well, we're cooked, we're doomed, the end of the world is coming. Even if the end of the world is coming, folks, I would say to you, when you look at your Maker, you will say, I did what I could. I didn't do nothing. I did what I could for myself, but for my family, for my community, and for the rest of the world. I have been given free choice and free will. I've been given a place on this planet, and I will do the best I can with the place that I have. So my message, such as it is one of upbeat and hope. My preference, my choice, my desire, my message is, let's do something about this. Let's look at these dark things. Let's recognize that most of them come from the same source. Let's be aware that there are dark forces in this world, and that the dark forces in some fashion are closing in. Are they going to close in? Are they going to close in a certain fashion? Are they going to pull any one of these triggers or all of them? Will they need them all? I don't want to ask those questions. I want to stop them before they pull the triggers. I want to arrest them. I want to try them. I want to dispossess them of their ill-gotten gain. I want to charge them for the evil things they've done to us for hundreds of years, but to hold them accountable for the things that have been done in their lifetime. And I want to see them convicted and the rest of us freed from all of that evilness. Now, when we go back to Gandhi, who had diapered Indians facing on the great power of the British Empire, Gandhi said we must come forward. We will do so in a peaceful, non-violent way, but we will not allow a foreign entity to rule us. And what I would say to you is there is a foreign entity, and we are vastly outpowered. And in a sense, we are diapered Indians. But what we must do is step forward, and we must, with the sheer power and strength of our presence and with our numbers, reverse this process. And we cannot do it by clicking our mouse and putting stickers, bumper stickers on our car. So that's my message for today. I hope you see it as a more powerful, positive message. I see us until you can't hear me, until you can't hear each other, until you can't hear other dissidents. We have a choice, we have freedom, we have a voice, we have the capacity to organize and to respond. And I charge and ask you to do so. Thank you so much for watching.